So in one of my past Valve videos, I mentioned that Gabe Newell had a bit of a grudge with the PS3. Valve and Gabe Newell would openly complain about the issues that it had when it came to developing games for it. But as time went on, it seemed like the system would make a recovery, and by the second half of the generation, it had pretty much caught up to the 360. But in that first half, it seemed like Valve was dedicated to just working on 360. They would focus on games like Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 and release those exclusively for 360 and PC. Valve would soon realize that Microsoft had their own problems, and it seemed like releasing patches and free DLC was not something that the 360 was going to allow them to do. I think it's generally accepted that Valve reconsidered due to having trouble with Left 4 Dead when it came to providing DLC and patches on 360. There are some interviews with Gabe and the rest of Valve staff saying that the PS3 was more akin to something like Steam. I'm sure some deals were made with Sony and Valve in order to get things back on track with the PS3, but all of this led to Portal 2's surprise announcement at E3 in 2010, where Gabe Newell would come on stage, apologize for the way he spoke about the PS3, and announce that Portal 2 would have, quote, the best version on any console for PS3.
Now, I've been pretty outspoken in my comments about the current generation of game consoles. So I'd really like to thank everyone at Sony for their gracious hospitality and for not repeatedly punching me in the face.
While we don't have too many details about the PS3 version's development, we do know that from the get-go it was being tied into Steamworks and the Steam network. Portal 2 would come with a free Steam code for anyone who bought the PS3 version, meaning that you could play PC and PS3 crossplay together with only one copy of the game. I bought Portal 2 on PS3 not just because it was my main console at the time, but because it came with a free code for the Steam version in every copy. Allowing people on PS3 and PC to both connect and play the co-op together was probably the first time I ever saw console and PC crossplay. I still have my original copy lying around. This is like peak Valve here, and they knew that they were the GOAT at the time, and they would offer these insane deals that you simply couldn't refuse. 2 copies of a brand new game for 2 different systems was unheard of at the time, and it's not even something that we see today. But Valve knew what they had was gold, and they knew that they could push it on PS3 and also get people onto Steam with this. I have great memories of playing the PS3 version in my living room while my brother played co-op with me from his PC. And we would just kind of shout down the hall and be like, hey, like, go put this here or whatever. Portal 2 on PS3 was a solid way to play an amazing game. At about the same time, the PS3 was beginning to support motion controls because of the popularity of things like the Wii and Xbox Kinect. Everybody had their own version of motion controls at the time, and Sony was no different. So when Portal first released, it originally had no intention of supporting PS3's cavalcade of accessories. But as the PS3 continued to push the Move more and more, it became a part of a lot of first-person games. I mean, it just made sense. If you were in first person with a gun, you'd want to be able to point and shoot, right? After about a year, it all led to PS3 Portal 2 being patched with PS Move support, allowing you to play the entire game with the Move and navigation controllers. The PS Move was being stuck onto nearly every game at the time. Sony games like Killzone 3 and Resistance 3 had PS Move support for their entire campaigns, and even some major third-party games like BioShock Infinite also got the treatment. If I go through my entire PS3 collection, you'll see a lot of those tiny little PS Move logos that indicate that the Move is supported, but my Portal 2 doesn't say this because Move support was patched in. PS Move support wasn't just thrown onto Portal 2, they also released a standalone DLC campaign called Portal 2 in Motion.
If you are a non-employee who has discovered this facility amid the ruins of civilization, welcome. And remember, testing is the future, and the future starts with you.
So technically, this wasn't exclusive to the PS3, so let's talk about that real quick. I originally thought that Portal 2 in Motion was exclusive for PS3, but it turns out that's not entirely the case. At the time, Valve and Razer made a partnership with this company called 6sense, who were focused on developing motion controls for PC. It seems like the 3 parties worked together to develop the Razer Hydra, which is this freaky looking ball controller with 2 handles that kind of look like Wii nunchucks. Based on what I see online, it was bundled with Portal 2 and came with what is functionally the same DLC that was released on Portal 2 for PS3. It seems like the Hydra supported about 50 games, but from what I can tell, Portal 2 was its first real application.
See you in court, mate.
This whole Razer Hydra thing is news to me. I was basically following everything Valve was doing at the time, and while I feel like I have some fleeting memories of the PS3 version, I don't think I've ever heard of this. I don't think you can even access these old versions on Steam. I think if you bought a Razer Hydra on eBay or something, it might not even let you play Portal 2 in motion. Speaking of which, it's also not even called Portal 2 in motion on PC. But anyway, knowing that this DLC came out and I'd completely left it behind, I decided to get a couple PS3 Move controllers, download Portal 2 in motion, and check it out.
Dr. Freeman, I presume. You better hurry. The Combine can be slow to wake, but once they're up, you don't want to get in their way.
It actually took me a while to get Portal 2 set up on my PS3 at all. I had to update Portal 2 and my PS3, which meant connecting to the internet, and I also had to get a modified password through PSN in order to log in. I don't really use PSN that much anymore, so digging up my old account took some time. For some reason, the PS3 wasn't letting me buy the DLC, despite having just added money to my wallet, so that took some time too. I put money in through my phone, and I was worried I'd have to hook up a PS4, but gladly I didn't have to do that. Of course, I had to set up the PS Move camera as well, and get the controllers charged up too. Something I always found really weird is the way that the PS3 kind of prevents you from charging its controllers in any other way besides plugging it into an actual PS3. They don't really work with any of the adapters that I have, so I always end up just having to leave my PS3 on. Now that we're all set up, we can take a look at Portal 2 on PS3.
Bam! Secret panel. Got it open while your back was turned. Pick me up, or let's get out of here. Would you pick me up?
Being a later generation PS3 game, Portal 2 on console I think looks pretty great. It runs about as good as you would expect for a game like this, at about 30 FPS and 720p. The load times aren't great to begin with, but aren't egregious, so you could get used to it. I'm no Digital Foundry, but you can see for yourself in the footage, it runs well enough. This is a good old case of PS3 era mandatory motion blur, which I think does look a little ugly and maybe doesn't help with motion sickness. But otherwise, the PS3 version holds up pretty well in the graphics department. It's hard to imagine that this game is 10 years old. For the record, I did also try out Portal 2 on Series X, which ran great. The Switch version also seems like it's just as good, and runs great too. I still don't have it, but who cares? One pretty major aspect, I think, that is missing from the console versions are the custom levels. I believe a couple years after Portal 2 was released, the PC version got a full-fledged map maker, and that just never saw light on console. The map maker in Portal 2 is a little bit limited, but it can let you do some fun things, and it's cool to tool around with. Allowing you to randomly play new levels through Steam Workshop is a pretty cool feature. And since it's a free DLC, it's a little disappointing that it never met any console version. They also released the peer review DLC for Portal 2, and while it's a free DLC add-on on PS3 and Xbox, I think it's just included on the PC version. You'll have to let me know about the Switch one. I haven't really played this on a PS3 probably since it came out, and I've already played through Portal 2 a few times, but a lot less frequently than Portal 1. Portal 2 is a great game with better puzzles on average in my opinion, but it's a lot less replayable because of the story aspects that you kind of have to go through. Partway through my playthrough, I decided it's time to start using the Move controller. I went through about 80% of the game with the Move controls, and I think that was maybe a mistake. So let's get into this. I honestly have some real issues with the Move controller's design. Compared to something like Wii remotes, or even the standard DualShock 3, the Move controller is just plain uncomfortable. My hands were killing me after playing just a few hours with these things. It sounds like I'm whining, and you're free to think that, but having to readjust the aim while pointing an unbalanced stick at the TV is just a failure of simple ergonomics. They're like anti-ergonomic to me. The handles on a Wii Remote feel like they were nicely balanced for your hands, and you can comfortably rest it in your palm. But the Move controller is like a smooth cylinder that your hands have to sort of wrap around. And the Move controller's gotta have the strangest layout of any controller. You've got these tiny, sad face buttons, and you've probably got the most awkward start and select button placement of any modern controller. For whatever reason, the triggers on the Navigator controller and the Move controller feel different, even though you're supposed to be using these things in tandem. If you know what it feels like, the left one is closer to a DualShock 3 trigger, and the right trigger is closer to something like a PS4 or Xbox controller. Altogether, it's just awkward. If that wasn't enough of an issue, Portal 2 on the software side might not really have a good time with the Move. I played a couple hours of BioShock Infinite on my PS3, and I felt like I had a way better experience than I did on Portal 2. You can tell Portal 2 wasn't really built with the Move in mind. You have to recalibrate the controllers through the start menu, so anytime you feel like your controller is misaligned, you have to reopen the options menu, double click, and then go back to the game. Half of the time, I would point away from the screen and just accept that the gyro was my only way to control. You get stuck with this annoying message flicking in and out, telling you to recenter your controller, but at some point you just stop caring. Modern games on Switch that use gyro controls tend to have a recenter button that's accessible at all times. But as far as I could tell, this wasn't the case in Portal 2. But I guess on a more positive note, the little light ball changes color to match your portal, so that's fun. Alright, that's enough ranting about the Move controller. I got that out of the way, let's move on.
Great job, astronaut, war hero, and/or Olympian. With your help, we're gonna...
I made my way all the way through to the last stretch of the game, and of course, I still had some fun. Playing Portal 2 with some bad controls doesn't really change the fact that it's still a fantastic game. At least I got to do some waggling, walking from place to place. It made things a bit more entertaining. I want to know which one of you guys actually played this game with the PS Move, front to back. Because after having done it myself, I don't think I'm ever doing that again. After finally getting to the end of the game and sending Wheatley out to space, I went into the Portal 2 in motion. Portal 2 in motion attempts to make the most of the PS Move controller by adding mechanics to the portal gun. So they added 3 new mechanics that the portal gun can do at all times. First is one-on-one, which allows you to freely move an object in space. You can move it forward, backward, and rotate it in any direction. If you've played Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, it's sort of like Ultra Hand. Next up is portal surfing, which allows you to move and rotate any portal along a surface. This is pretty fun to do, but it also lags the heck out of the PS3. This is probably the laggiest you can make the game, and you can clearly see the frames drop as I move the portal. And the last new mechanic is scaling, which lets you stretch a special cube along each axis. Scaling feels a bit like an extension of one-on-one. You can distort the cubes to make different shapes like walls or large panels. Portal 2 in motion is divided into 3 main segments: the tutorial, the basic chambers, and the advanced chambers, for a total of 13 levels. The tutorial is short, and it ends pretty abruptly, but after that I went right into the basic levels. Let's take a deep dive into the in-motion DLC.
Okay, so now these laser bullets are coming my way, so I have to use the shield to block them back, or I can use them to aim into this receptor
we
here.
tilted it in order to get them into a specific place that will open the gate for the other thing. When you are doing it, and again, look at the screen and look at his hands, because it's important to see how his hands are extension of the computer, and how the computer is extension of his hands. I know you can take the whole show from me with this. Can you get killed, please?
Actually, I have it in God mode.
He's in God mode. He cannot get killed.
Wouldn't want to die during
Never
God
mind.
mode.
Anyway, thank you.
Great,
Joystick
thank you.
from 6 cents that give you all these direction. That's really amazing.
Thanks, man.
So first thing first, in Chamber 1, they're going to teach you about one-on-one. The box mechanic is a little bit hard to handle at first, and it took me a while to figure it out. You really have to stretch your arm forward to make the beam turn red, which is the full distance. Sitting back and moving helped out a bit here, but I dropped those cubes in the water more than I'd like to admit, and it took some time to get used to. Chamber 2 is really just Chamber 1 with more steps. At this point, I was like, oh no, this is all gonna be one-step solutions. These are the basic levels after all, so we'll have to wait and see. Portal surfing in the third chamber felt a bit too telegraphed in my opinion. I know these are the basic levels, but it's so clear that you're supposed to just drag this into this little spot to do the thing. Because of the way you can rotate the portals, it is kind of fun to just spin yourself around and mess with that a bit. Angling the laser here was interesting, but it still felt a little bit too telegraphed. The last part of Chamber 2 has you using the one-on-one alongside portal surfing. Chamber 4 introduces portal surfing to turrets and the light bridge mechanic. Using the light bridges to create walls to prevent the turrets from shooting you, it shows that there are some cool concepts here. I think that I had the most fun with portal surfing out of all the mechanics. Crouching back through a tilted portal was a fun interaction too. Chamber 5 focused on scaling. Scaling has got to be the most janky mechanic they added here. Because of the way it's handled, you end up unintentionally moving the object while you're also trying to scale it. If you ask me, it's too many things tied to one motion. I feel like this should have been set up in a different way. It can be a bit frustrating because the motion is tied to one-on-one as well as scaling. So you're scaling at the same time that you're changing angles. It's hard to explain how it feels, but it's just a little finicky. I'm not really sure if I solved this puzzle properly, but I think it worked out. Chamber 7 is the first one where I felt like they were really challenging me. I got stuck here trying to figure out the correct order to do stuff. My only issue with Chamber 7 was that if I messed up, I would have to recreate the bridge through scaling, and again, it's so janky that it would take me a minute just to fiddle with. Having to make a bridge every time I messed up was pretty annoying. After that, you go halfway up the elevator and then boom, credits. And when I was hit with the credits all of a sudden, I honestly thought the DLC was over after like 25 minutes. But luckily, there was still another 6 advanced chambers to go through. There are 6 advanced chambers, and just like the basic section, they're broken up per mechanic. Advanced 1 was pretty good. I like the concept of rallying the same box with one-on-one to get through the level. But it's pretty clear here that there aren't too many applications for what boils down to extendo arms. I think that Advanced Chamber 2 was actually a more solid puzzle. The objective is to find a way to make this cube hold a button but also reach you. At first you have to use the propulsion to keep the cube on the wall, but later on you realize that you have to reuse that propulsion after you've already made it upstairs. It sounds very simple like that, but it took me some time to realize what I had to do. The section following that was pretty easy though. The hardest part was really just finding a way to angle the controller to hit the turrets with the laser. The following level, Chamber 3, returned the focus to the portal surfing. Applying portal surfing alongside gels was actually really fun. You can kind of turn your portal into a little bit of a paintbrush that you can spread any gel you want around with, and I think it was the best use of InMotion's mechanics so far. In Chamber 4, you have free access to all 3 gels, and you use it to paint yourself a path and get through to the next section. This is probably my favorite chamber in all of the DLC. You can like absolutely cover this area with portal gel. Last up are Chamber 5 and 6, which are focused on scaling. Unfortunately, these 2 levels were probably the weakest. For Chapter 5, you don't even really use scaling for half the level. You just make a big box and break some glass, and then you do some more laser pointing. The final level, Chamber 6, is a bit more thought out. You have to make a wall to block bullet fire, and then use it again to break the glass and destroy all the turrets. It's a pretty satisfying conclusion, but I wouldn't call it advanced. And just as quickly as I started, Portal 2 InMotion was over. The whole campaign probably took me about an hour and a half, but it wasn't quite over yet. Since about half a year after the original DLC launched, they added 6 more co-op levels for whatever freaks were out there that had 2 Navigator controllers and 2 PS Move controllers. So of course I played it. In case you're curious, the Move controller does react to the color of your portal gun, even in co-op. But the LED in the controller doesn't really support the shade of indigo that Atlas uses, so it has to use pink instead. So I brought my buddy Matt in to help me play through it. He has his own channel, and if you want to check it out, it's in the description. Just like in the single player DLC, the co-op DLC uses the same mechanic structure for levels. There's 6 total levels, and it begins with one-on-one. It took a while to get my friend up to speed on the controls. Just like when I played the single player, we dropped the cube a few times and then made our way to the next section. In general, I think one-on-one works a lot better when used to relay the cube between 2 players. The next area expands on this, and it really felt like it was a more interesting use of the mechanic. Throwing the cube up like this is unintentional, but it was still pretty fun and useful.
Oh, damn, nice. There we go, that was perfect. Alright.
This level uses a light bridge and momentum gel to carry you through a upside down portal. It took us a while to realize that putting a portal upside down changes the angle that you exit the portal. You have to use an upside down portal to give yourself more height when jumping through it. That doesn't seem to make sense, but it also kinda does. I wonder what the physics are behind that. Once we figured out how you're supposed to do these things, the following segment was pretty easy. Something that's kind of unfortunate in Portal 2 co-op is the frequency that you have to have somebody do something and then have the other person just do the same thing again to catch them up. I wish there was a more interesting way they could do it other than you take this turn, I take this turn, because it feels a little redundant. After that level, we were on to Chamber 4. This one focuses on using light bridges as walls to block turrets, kind of like that one level in single player, but it was an evolution of that idea. This part where you needed to jump and spin the portal was really interesting and had us stumped for quite some time. It was very execution based, and we couldn't really tell if we were doing it properly, but it did work and it felt like a solid puzzle. Chamber 5 was all about using angled light bridges to catch gels and launch your partner. It wasn't really tough to figure out, but it was fun to mess around with, and it was a good concept. The added complexity of having a second portal adds a lot to the motion elements, since they let you do more interesting things with them. In the next part, you're basically dragging a propulsion beam to catch your partner and carry them onto a safe platform. It was a pretty good one, even if I messed up a dozen times. It kind of reminded me of like a trust fall. You're sort of just helpless to be carried along by the beam. I think if the player in the beam had something to do while being carried, it maybe would have been more interesting. But the frame rate probably wouldn't have appreciated it.
Did I get you? Yeah. Okay, no. Okay, you just gotta jump out. Oh, did I go too fast?
Yeah. After that, we were on to Chamber 6, the last level in the whole DLC. This part took the longest of them all, but it wasn't really because the puzzle was super complex. I just think that the timing for the execution of this puzzle was a little too tight. You've got to catch a box, then hand it off before it gets destroyed, then place a portal to get that same box into a new beam, all in the span of about 10 to 15 seconds. It sounds a little confusing, because it is. We're handling all of this with the PS Move controller on a laggy PS3. It nearly took us as long to beat this one chamber as it did for the rest of the DLC, and I feel like it left a bit of a sour note to an otherwise fun campaign. We finished the 6 co-op chambers in about an hour and a half, the same length as the single player. With that said, In Motion was completely finished. There wasn't any weird credit cut, just a teleport back to the tiny little hub room. With all that said and done, I really think In Motion had a lot of room to elaborate on its mechanics. Portal surfing with the gels was probably the most interesting aspect, but it really felt like they could have done more. And the scaling mechanic felt a bit half-finished and underutilized. Given that it doesn't even make an appearance in the co-op levels, it's a bit disappointing. I think portal surfing really could have been a main mechanic in a Portal DLC on its own. It doesn't even really need the motion control aspect. The thing is a lot of the motion controls aren't really something that you couldn't figure out how to do on a controller. I would have loved to see a lot more levels with these mechanics and have them really flesh them out. The level design in the co-op sections are a lot more in-depth, and it feels like they were given a bit more time to make something interesting with them. whereas the single player levels never really do anything besides very surface level usages. I would have loved to see a full companion cube style level with the one-on-one and scaling mechanic, or a guiding level where you take something along a track with portal surfing, or maybe even just some new co-op levels that use the scaling at all. For $10, you get about 2 hours of content. I would say that's a little bit on the light side. In Motion feels a lot more like a tech demo that just happened to be released on PS3 because the PS Move was compatible. The room to expand on some of these concepts really shows In Motion's tech demo roots, and rather than make a full-fledged DLC campaign, they released it as it was, and added a little bit extra at the end. I would love to know if any of you have even played this thing. I think it probably didn't do very well, and it came out so late in Portal 2's lifespan. I think by the time this DLC came out, especially with the co-op section, no one was really bothering with the PS3 version unless they really just wanted to play the campaign. I'd be really surprised if even 5% of the people watching this video have even played this thing. If you did play it, let me know your thoughts, and if you've never heard of it, let me know down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate any support that you can give. I'm open to your guys' ideas, so if there's something Valve related or just in gaming in general that you would like me to cover, let me know in the comments. But if you want me making more Valve content, let me know what you want to see. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for watching.
Oh, can you do it again, actually, so I can get fit? I realized, like, I should have... Include that in the video.
Alright, bye-bye.